automatic, symptomatic, handing on a bad habit. I don't know the words at all. I just feel it in my soul. Teddy Swims. My son loves him. This is the one, guys. This is the series that's going to push it over the top. Welcome, everybody, to Existential Dad, my new show. I'm comedian Mike Cannon. Stav is my producer, director, confidant. Not that Stavros, but we will be tagging him for algorithmic benefits. This show, it's a dad show. By the title, hopefully it's a little bit atypical. I love talking dad stuff. I talk about it on Chrissy Chaos. I talk about it on every podcast I've guested on, radio show, you name it. Some of you hate it, some of you love it. So I've decided to create a separate space for it. I like talking about like existential philosophy stuff, not necessarily parenting techniques. You can get into the weeds with that stuff. People get defensive about their techniques versus yours. They think you're doing your parenting at them because they're not, it's a whole thing. I don't care about that. I just want to talk abstract feeling stuff, Plus, I think it's going to be a fun show because, I'm a comic, so I'll be funny and mentally ill, which hopefully makes you feel, both of those things will make you feel better about yourself. Also, a lot of you know this, but for personal selfish reasons, I need this. I need this show. We are about to welcome, what a selfish piece of shit I am, but my family's not in show business, so I'll take the responsibility. I am about to welcome a second son into my family. My wife is there too. She's involved slightly. But we are, and I'm feeling all the feelings, both positive, negative. Are there negatives or is it just nerves? It's all anxiety. You get it. It's the entire spectrum of feelings. So I need this as a safe space to air out my anxieties and to also go to you guys for advice, because that's what this show is. I'm not giving advice. Each episode, I'm posing a question to my social media followers. That's what I'm doing now, and eventually to you guys, the viewers, once this launches. But I'll be posing a question, existential in nature, towards dads in particular, but parents, you're encouraged to answer as well, wherever you fall on the gender spectrum. And then I'll talk about my perspective and read some of your answers and go through with it. How you doing, Stav?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to hear your insightful dad knowledge. I don't have any kids, but I don't know, like, if I should be taking your advice and hanging on to it.
Well, I don't. Again, I'm trying not to give advice because I'm viewing this as a discussion. It's a discussion involving one person, which might be the most narcissistic, platform I could give myself. But I think that's where I'm landing, So it's a discussion-based show. You guys actually have just as much input as I. I pose the questions, you guys answer, and let's get to the first one. This first episode, I wanted to come out swinging. I asked to my social media followers, what was your biggest fear before becoming a dad? And what's your biggest fear since becoming? So me personally, I had a lot of fears before becoming a father. I have a pretty tumultuous relationship with my dad. This show is not about negativity, so I'm not going to be getting into any of the details. But it's just, chaotic, violent at times, all abusive in various ways from both parties. So it's not, just an unidirectional blame. But that relationship that I had with my father was like, obviously front and present before becoming a father. So my entire time leading up to my wife giving birth was just like, I have to do whatever it takes to make exactly the opposite decisions that he made. I have to give a shit. I have to be interested. I have to be a supportive partner, not just in earning money for the family, which grateful, Pops. Thank you. Appreciate it. The food was delicious. Clothing was warm. House inadequate. But no, I do appreciate that stuff. But I plan on doing that and also having somewhat of a 360 relationship with my son. It's incredibly important to me. And I don't know, that was my main fear, basically. Also, a weird thing, and I don't know if toxic masculinity, we're getting into it, but I felt I'm not the most masculine guy. Look at this. I'm wearing a fucking pedally shirt buttoned down to my tits. It's like, I'm wearing cloth clogs, guys. This is not a man. But when my wife is pregnant, that is the most masculine I've ever been in my entire life. That's when I feel toxic masculinity. Like anytime that she's walking by somebody and they're even slightly briskly walking in a way that I think could pose a threat, or if they bumped her, it would harm her. Anything even slightly, which is probably paranoia, but anything that is even slightly like in the halo zone, it's like punting and receiving a punt. Anything that's within her halo zone, I am just like ready to fucking attack people. And I wonder, I mean, that's obviously an instinctual thing, right? Like it's the only connectivity I have to cavemen because, they wouldn't claim this. Do you think cavemen, if they were if they were shown what modern dads are, or me, what modern dad I am, and they saw, you know, just me in this shirt talking about my feelings and existentialism into a camera, they'd just be like, what was this even for?
I think you would be clustered into the group to gather rather than hunt
Oh
saber-tooth
my
tiger.
God, dude. I'd be the biggest gatherer you've ever seen in your entire life. But I feel like I do gather quite well. I pick up my son's toys, Speedy. Not typically right after I fucking tear my Achilles on a fucking Wolverine or something like that.
You're talking about your dad and not wanting to do the things that he did to raise you.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself actually doing some things that your dad did? Do you find yourself becoming your dad a little bit?
Well, there's no fighting genetics and there's no fighting like the way that you were brought up. So I have to actively battle my natural reactions to things. So like for instance, I just read that book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it's all about how, taking responsibility for your own feelings, your actions, your choices, all that stuff, which I've had to do with my dad. Like the thing that actually made me empathize with my dad and made me realize that he came from like a life of hell and trauma and abuse was my son when he was a really little baby looked exactly like my father, but only when he was crying. And it made me see my dad as a baby. And I was like, dude, what the fuck? Like, it's just the trippiest experience I've ever had because I'm the father to my son who is my father crying in my face. I was forced. I was forced to be like, okay, at the very least, my father was a blank slate that wanted nothing more than to be loved, hugged, etc. All those things that all of us as human beings require, but didn't get that. So all of that stuff I can empathize with, right? The choices, though, after that, once he becomes a father, are all his responsibility. So even though all that trauma can guide your feelings and your emotions, which is my huge problem with just fucking like the trauma Olympics of today in general, is people allow it to define them and allow it to guide their entire lives instead of making the active decision to be like, okay, I've processed that. Now it's time to move on in a healthy way. It's like, my dad didn't do that. So he held on to the trauma, perpetuated the cycle. And then I had to wake up at some point in my 30s and hopefully it's not too late to abruptly stop this where it is. But I have to I'm an angry guy. It is well documented on podcasts, stand up, whatever, blustery with not a lot of, whatever behind it. But I've dealt with anger and just like impulse control, I suppose, my entire life. So with my son, it's an active battle with myself, and I don't snap, I don't yell. I've certainly I've gotten stern, but even that, like, I apologize all the time because my parents never apologized, not once, or at least not that I remember. I actively try to remember my own childhood. That is what it is. I actively try to remember my childhood because it felt like when I was a kid, my parents had never been children. You know what I mean? Like they were born adults. They were born with a full bush, just ready to fully lord over just, these me, who they didn't necessarily actively give information to. They just expected me to behave like an adult as a child. And then when I didn't, they were like, "What is your problem?" And I'm like, "Nobody's telling me anything. Equip me with info, and I bet you won't be as frustrated." So, that's like lack of communication, lack of impulse control, uh, dying. Dying's a huge fucking fear. Like the moment my wife got pregnant, I immediately, all I could think of was mortality. And it's still all I can think of with my son being born because it's like my son being born, he's well into his life, but it's like it, it's one of those things where all you want to do, I've never had a reason to live outside of myself. Now there are literally people that require my existence, my support, my money. like literally everything. So there's that actually is a great carrot for me because I don't know if I would have found the self motivation. How dark is that?
Pretty dark with the butterfly flying right in
Yeah,
front of
with
you.
the butterfly. That was my grandpa.
Okay, okay.
Now we're going to start reading your questions. Stav, as producer, I think that's actually a great job that you're going to read the questions and then I can look at them, reference them, and kind of go off.
So Brandon writes in, biggest fear was, how do I know what he needs when he can't talk?
Mm-hmm.
Biggest fear now that he's 13 is how I can't control every variable in his day. Also, very thankful he got his mother's hair and not mine.
Well, that's how it is, man. That's why, some sons with a father with like a luscious, beautiful head of hair has this just like patchwork because his mom actually is, she's fallen. Whatever, who gives a shit? But yeah. How do I know what he needs when he can't talk? I also lacked that fundamental trust in like people having raised babies throughout time. You know what I mean? Like I don't know about you, but I have a tough time taking information from people. I've always had a tough time being taught or coached or like I always just took it almost defensively. Like, oh, I know. I know, you know. So it was like when people were trying to say like, "Oh, they only cry for because they're hungry, sleepy, or they have a wet diaper." It's that simple when they're an infant. But something in my brain before my son got here was like unable to trust that. To trust that it was that simple to where like, yeah, but what if they like really don't like somebody in the room? And I have to get them out of there and the baby is psychically capable of feeling danger, almost like a dog. That I actually do believe, but not necessarily as an infant.
There's there's that Long Island ghost whisperer.
The medium,
Yeah,
yeah.
or dog whisperers. I
Hmm.
wonder if there's any baby whisperers. If not, that's a good racket for somebody.
That's what the show is. My canon baby whisperer. You bring me a baby, and I'll tell you exactly what that kid is thinking just based on the furrow of their brow. But there, and then, yeah, but this is, so Brandon's talking about, and man, you're catching me at a really great time where I'm kind of like getting back because this is all me, man. I'm a tense, anxious person at homeostasis. So I'm really like taking steps to actively try to untie those knots and trying to be as like Zen and almost Buddhist as humanly possible and just at peace. Radical acceptance. I've really like tried to do that as best as possible. But that's the thing where he's like, biggest fear now that he's 13 is how I can't control every variable. I mean, that's like literally tale as old as time, teenager entering into almost adulthood, but not equipped with all of the tools. So you have to trust them. You have to trust their ability to fail and then rebound from the failure because the failure is inevitable. So all you have had to do is, or not all you've had to do, but what you've had to do is equip them with the ability to take absolute haymakers from life, learn the biggest lessons at the height of their fucking hormones, and then also have the ability to then just like regulate their emotion, come back down, maybe communicate with you or a friend or whatever, and and then make the best decision possible. But yeah, dude, I mean, teenager shit, I can't even imagine that. I not yet, at least. I'm heading into kindergarten, and it's like I'm weeping at my son's fucking preschool graduation. You memorize 4 songs, and I'm like, I remember when this kid was just a lump of dog shit, and now look at him, a standing human.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I have nieces and nephews, and just to see them do the simplest task of like, oh wow, you could clean a dish now. Like,
Totally.
it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, dude, my son's like writing, and of course, this is my first time parenting, so there's going to be people maybe that watch this with older kids, 13-year-olds, where I hope you haven't lost. I'm sure I will. I'll be, whittled down by the, fucking stress of life. But I hope that I don't lose that kind of like wonder and that memory of how awesome all of these checkpoints have been. Like, because everything does happen so fast and so ever present and ongoing and so dizzying. Like everything is just constant, 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 that it's hard to even reminisce. Like it's hard for me to even like sit and be like, oh, 6 months. Like, what was that like? Like, I forget what it was like, but I don't. like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a me thing or if that's a parenting thing or if that's because I do stand up and I'm writing material while also being, a dad. It's I don't know. It's tough because I guess writing material while being a dad, and especially since I'm writing autobiographical shit, that's kind of that's kind of I guess what I'm talking about, reminiscing.
So James says it's hard for him to remember clearly uh, one for before. The whole thing was anxiety, but after forgetting the kids on the subway, I wake up in cold sweats.
Yeah, that's city shit, dude. I mean, that episode of Louie was one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen because it just makes you know you have to have a plan, obviously. Every city family has to have a plan if and when they get separated, all that stuff. But that episode of the daughter just kind of aimlessly walking off the subway and he's tending to his other daughter and that parental balance where you realize that sometimes the majority of your focus is going to this one while this one is kind of grazing. And then she just fucking walked off a New York City subway onto a platform by herself. Boom, boom, closed out. I mean, yeah, that's enough, like, to make anybody not live there. It really is, dude. I mean, I really, we did plan to raise our son in Brooklyn, and then COVID happened, and that was the end of that. But the more I think about it, the more I'm grateful that also, like, we didn't do that. It would have been cool. I think we would have adapted. I don't have any like I don't have a lack of faith in us in our ability to adapt to that situation, but like I know I'm much more comfortable in this environment. This is how I grew up. I know like it's more space, it's more whatever. Different strokes for different folks.
Travis says biggest fear before was, am I going to be a good dad? Fears now are they going to make good choices?
Yeah. I think that's like again, and I do love the fact this is kind of nice, right? Just dudes opening up. It's kind of nice to have guys just kind of say, "Hey, man, I was afraid of this shit." Because I bet you don't get, I mean, the responses to these questions online has been heartening enough for me to want to do this, because I posted these and being like, man, from like hardcore comedy fans, they're just going to trash me because this is like a dad centric, almost feelings type thing where it's not funny all the time, blah, 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 which I totally get. Smash away. But the fact is, so many dudes responded as if they've been waiting months for somebody to ask them how they're doing. like true. I'm sweating to the point where my glasses are fogging. This is pointless. But so many were like, oh, I've been so like, thank you. Nobody's ever asked me what I've been afraid of. Nobody ever asked me like how I'm doing, all that stuff, which, that's their fault. It's also your fault. We're part of the communication thread. So we have to also open them up to being able to ask us how we're doing. I've recognized that because I'm a distant motherfucker, especially when I'm feeling sad and angry. And I tend to push away and isolate and go into my own thing. And people are like, oh, Mike's fine. Like, he's okay. I have that air about me where I smile a lot publicly. So people are like, he's fine. Don't worry about him. And then like 2 months go by and I'm like, I was hit by a car. Why isn't anybody asking me how I am? And people are like, oh, I thought you were okay. You just seemed fine. You kept working. It is one of those things where, it's nice and then it gets real sad because I mean, social media, I love, and that's why I want to have this because it's like, it's both sensitive dad shit, but I'm also going to make fun of it and mock it quite a bit because on social media, I mean, it has not taken dads long to turn into mothers. The amount of fucking pensive looking out a window while it's raining, like, nobody asks me how I'm feeling when I'm out on, doing my job, fucking all that shit, just a long paragraph and some sad, and I get it. It's, comment farming and you're looking for engagement, all of that stuff, but it is brutal that is actual dad content that exists in the world.
Do you when you tell other people that you guys are having another kid, do you say we are pregnant or my wife is pregnant?
I say we are having a kid. I think I say both, I guess. I'm like, my wife is pregnant. We are pregnant. I mean, I am taking responsibility. I will know this child. But no, she deserves the credit, but then some people take it as I'm isolating. So you can't win. So I tend to say both. I tend to just kind of say until the person's face makes a smile. So like we're pregnant. And they're like, I'm like, she's pregnant.
Justin says biggest fear is becoming one when not wanting one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's an awareness that I feel like I wish more people had is, you know, I think people get so aggressive in their stance because people feel the need to debate things that don't need to be debated. It's like if you want to be a parent, that's awesome. If you don't, that's also awesome. Like if you know yourself well enough to not want a child and think that you can't care for one or at least don't want to give up the effort to do so, if you're that self-aware or at least that just like definitive in your choices, that's great. That's a great thing. The problem comes when like each side feels the need to justify their position. It's like I don't give a shit. I don't care that you want to be a dad. I don't care that you don't want to be. The amount of people that have like, Ari Shafir, who I absolutely love, but like I was at the cellar and somebody asked me when my wife was pregnant with our first son, somebody was like, "Oh, your wife's pregnant? That's great." And Ari turned to me, he's like, "Oh, she's pregnant? I don't care." I was like, yeah, I know you fucking more than a touch of the burgers. Like, get out of here, dude. Nobody cares that you don't care. I'm living my life even without your approval if you can if you can stand to imagine it. And I wish other people did that. But I also get that like that is a justifiable fear, obviously. And I think that's why you glove the fuck up, dude. Wear a tube sock, not even just a condom. Or if you definitely don't want to be a dad, like definitively, I would tie off. Like if I was a single guy and for sure I did not want to continue my this genetic coding, I'd get this turned into a giraffe. I might during my wife's delivery, by the way, for baby number 2, like as soon as my kid crowns, I'm gonna be like, "Wait, wait." Well, somebody get me over here.
Mike Daigle, before being present and do my personal career goals align with my family goals.
Yeah.
After injury, health issues, worse to my children.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part about the do my career goals align with my family goals is one, that of course is going to be a conversation that you have to have with yourself before having a child. Two, it almost doesn't even matter because there's ways well, one, it doesn't matter because all things change and evolve as your child ages and evolves and your priorities change. It's like, the things that used to be important to me in some ways career wise, and it's good, no longer I don't care about some of them. And then others are more important. Others are magnified because it's actually like results driven and not necessarily just like froofy comic shit. You know what I mean? Like not just perception becomes less important and tangible success becomes paramount. Just results just become everything. Like perception is like, hey, great, man. It's awesome if things look good, but I also don't care as long as everybody here is good. So that's like for me with like career stuff, comedy is on the outside probably people are like that's the worst job you could have being a father, but that's also like however you view it. I've had this argument with people before where I'm like, I don't know, I work at night when I'm in town, so I have all of my days free. I drive my son to school, I pick him up from school, so I see him more so than like I would if I had a 9 to 5 and I had to leave before he went to school and then I'd get home after he got to school and probably would only be able to put him to bed. And then on weekends, for sure, I'm away, which is difficult. But that means 4 concentrated days of attention I have with them versus the 2 I don't, and then half a day when I come back. And plus, for me as a comedian, like I've just heard too many stories about dads coming off the road and not reintegrating really well and just kind of like taking the day to kind of like, hey, dad's tired, whatever, and he's coming off the road, so let him recalibrate and then he'll join us tomorrow. But I'm like, no matter what, I'm right back in. So like the moment I land, and it's hard, it's energy sapping, but it's the only like why would I be a fucking dad if I didn't want to do that? You know what I mean?
Plus, it's a cool job. Like when your kid gets older, he's going to be able to say like, "My dad's a comedian."
Yeah.
Like just as a normie, I always used to think as a kid, like, my dad had he's like a tailor basically.
Yeah.
But like fathers who had cool jobs, like I always wondered, like, what is it like to be the kid of like I don't know, Elon Musk or something
Sure,
like
yeah,
that. You know what I
awful.
mean?
I mean, that's gotta be tough. Doesn't he have 10 and they're named after, like, vowels or something?
Yeah, it's all like computer code or some
Yeah.
shit.
But that yeah, I mean, mostly what I want my son and what I want my job and my wife's job because she owns her own business, so it's not just me. It's both of us have this different type of job, but what I want him to see is, like, dreams don't die the moment you have a kid. Is my dad I mean, my dad was an actor. He didn't necessarily have the discipline or work ethic that I have and wasn't, just whatever, just didn't push forward, didn't have whatever, didn't get the traction, and just gave up acting and quite loudly let us know that it was because of us. But so due to that, and then became a stockbroker, and his whole personality changed. He became hyper focused on money and status and all that shit. So it like immediately shifted my brain into this place of like, okay, well, one, I don't want to like have that be the driving force of my personality, which like, the current state of comedy is actually not dissimilar from being a stockbroker. Yeah, just in terms of all the numbers, the money, the everything that's in it. But and also not have a if I have a dream that I want to that I want to accomplish and I want to chase and I want to succeed at, then I can't allow that's a crazy word, but I can't allow having a family to destroy it. Like I feel like there's a way to have a typical life with an atypical job, especially if you have a fucking dope ass partner, which I have, and my wife that like we're constantly communicative. Our schedule is a Tetris map nightmare, constantly shifting. So there's tension, there's arguments, there's priorities, there's people giving up something that they need. Like there's an ebb and flow and a constant shift. But because of that, we're both able to have like a different type of job. And I think that's important for our kids. I think, at least, I don't know. I'm sure he'll become a fucking accountant because he's like, I don't want the stress of having to like, go on the road or whatever, which fine. That's what this is. It all pendulums. My dad gave it up. I took it the exact opposite way. Maybe my son will settle right back in the middle. That'd be great. Oh, you know what? This is actually a good one. So this is from Timmy Smith because this is like just constant. This is the mortality thing again that also kind of goes into a lot of what I'm dealing with mental health wise right now. So Timmy says, I drive myself crazy with irrational scenarios in my head of my 4-year-old trying to wake me up in the morning, but I'm dead, and my 2-year-old not having any memories of me. The fear of something terrible happening to my kids is also a huge fear, which can ruin my day. Dude, it's like, I mean, if you go through all these questions, this is a lot of it. A lot of it is that just like, and I think being a parent as well as social media, but I think being a parent like can kickstart OCD and like obsessive compulsive thought, and especially like what are the invasive thoughts, because I have a lot of that. I'm actually talking about it in the special that's coming out, but it's that's been my brain and a lot of that stuff. And that actually even happened to me as a kid when I had a baby sister. I used to have irrational dreams about her drowning in a lake, and I was underwater and I could see her 10 yards away, and I kept swimming and couldn't get to her. My like 6-month-old baby sister, crying face, and I'm 6. Like I'm 6 trying to swim. So all of these thoughts have always been in my head, and I think it's probably pretty typical, but I think it gets amplified when you have a kid because you are the adult. I'm the last stop. All of my dad shit started to dissipate, like my problems with my father started to actually dissipate once I realized, and thank you, Bobby Kelly, for this mantra, but it's like I'm the dad now. I'm the adult. I'm the last stop. I'm who he looks to. He's not looking at my grandpa or at his grandpa. He's looking at me because I'm the fucking dad. So it's like all of that stuff, me being the adult, it's actually empowering when I know it can be also overwhelming and anxiety inducing, but it's actually like, no, this is as good as it gets. Like, you know what? Who else is there? I'll make the fucking decisions. This one perfectly goes into the next topic, which will be the next episode. Steve Levy. And again, we're going to get back to this. We're going to pose more questions down the line. So follow me if you don't already. I assume you probably do, but if you don't already, follow me on social media or even on YouTube. Put it in the comments. I tend not to read those because they hurt my feelings. But you know, I'll find a way for somebody to look at it, and I'll maybe do this and keyword search, you know, anybody who's not being mean. But whatever. But this Steve Levy says, "Love that you put this together. My fear was so much in being a good provider and making sure they never felt less than or wanted. Afterwards, making sure I am present and that my own fears and stress don't get out on such a sweet, innocent child." So, one, that provider thing, which for sure with dads, I mean, that's a thing that has been driven into our brains, which, you know, not a lot of people discuss. Maybe they do. Maybe I don't read a lot. Maybe I don't watch the things where they discuss it. Who am I to say who discusses what? But, you know, from, you know, not, I feel like when it comes to gender roles, that that thing of like dude feeling like a provider is not necessarily a gender role that people are trying to make disappear right away. You know what I mean? They kind of like that. Like even if it's both, even if both parties are working, it doesn't hurt to still keep the provider title on the man. Where it just even as a subconscious thing where it just because it's in me and maybe that's from like a misogynistic father or whatever, but that's in me to provide even though my wife is a boss bitch that owns her own company, you know? So she provides just as much as I and we're a completely united household in that way, but it's like it's still in me to be like, I need to fucking pull this family out of the depression when, you know, I don't know. I don't that has to be like some sort of weird ingrained thing, right?
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
of course. And I think you're in the minority of having a wife that runs a business. You know,
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And but I mean, and that's not to speak down on if you don't have that kind of equal partnership. It's just like maybe you're I met a dude the other night who was at my show who was like humiliated to say he was a stay-at-home dad. Humiliated. And he was like a dude that could kick like beat the brakes off me. He was just a jack dude. And I was like, what do you like? Who's going to say anything to you, man? Like, why are you upset? It's like if your situation can afford that and you get to spend time with your kids, like, fucking do it, dude. Who gives a shit? But it's that weird thing, man, where it's like it is embedded in us and whatever. But that presence thing, the being presence is what we're going to discuss on the next episode because I that's an active struggle. So me trying to keep out these intrusive thoughts of fear and death and mortality and will I be a good provider and will I be there for my sons and blah 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 all that. That's all going on while I'm being a dad. So all of those thoughts and spiraling, and I'm making eye contact with my son, attempting to maintain presence and being in the now. So we'll discuss maybe whether you're able to do that or whether I'm able to do that on the next episode.